The stars above Earth used to look peaceful. People would lie on the grass at night, stare up at the sky, and feel small in a good way. They would wonder if anyone else was out there. They would hope that if someone came, they would come in peace. No one came in peace. The Vreth arrived on a Tuesday morning. Their ships were massive, dark, and completely silent. They did not send a warning. They did not ask for a meeting. They simply appeared in the sky, blocked out the sun over 3 continents, and started landing. By Thursday, it was over. Earth's governments had collapsed. Earth's armies had been scattered, and the people of Earth had been sorted, tagged, and put to work. The Vreth called themselves the Dominion. They had been ruling space for 3,000 years. They had conquered 46 other worlds before Earth. Every one of those worlds had fallen. Every one of those species had been broken, sorted, and turned into tools for the Dominion to use. They were very good at this. They had done it so many times that it had stopped feeling like conquest to them. It felt like routine. The Vreth were tall. The shortest among them stood nearly 6.5 feet. Their bodies were covered in dense, layered muscle that looked almost like armor under their gray skin. Their bones were thick and heavy. Their reflexes were faster than a human eye could follow. They were built for war in a way that nothing else in the galaxy seemed to match. They knew this. They were proud of this. It was, in their minds, proof that they deserved to rule. When they studied humans, they were not impressed. The Vreth scientists ran their tests carefully. They measured human height, weight, bone density, reaction speed, and pain tolerance. They compared everything against their own bodies and against the 46 other species they had already conquered. Humans ranked near the bottom of almost every category. Their bones were lighter. Their muscles were smaller. Their reflexes were slow. They got sick easily. They needed sleep every single day just to function. They cried when they were hurt. They panicked under pressure. The Vreth scientists filed their report and gave humanity a classification, Grade 3 Serval. It was one of the lowest grades in the Dominion system. It meant the species was weak, manageable, and useful for basic labor. It meant they were not a threat. It meant they did not need to be feared. They put humans to work. The orbital processing station called Dominion's Reach floated above what used to be called the Atlantic Ocean. It was a massive structure, more city than ship, built from dark metal and sharp angles. It had no windows facing Earth. The Vreth who worked there did not think about what was below them. Earth was just a supply source. The station was where real work happened. Ilara Voss had been on the station for 3 years. She was 31 years old. Before the Dominion came, she had been a combat engineer in a branch of the military that no longer existed. She had known how to build things, break things, and figure out why things failed. She had been good at her job. She had been calm under pressure. She had known how to look at a complicated problem and find the simple answer hidden inside it. Now she carried heavy metal containers from storage bays to processing lines for 12 hours a day. She wore a gray uniform with a number on the back. She ate what she was given. She slept in a room with 40 other humans on shelves that folded out from the wall. She did not complain. She did not cause trouble. She did exactly what she was told. The Vreth guards watched her and saw a model worker. They did not see what she was actually doing. Every day, Ilara watched. She watched the guards change shifts and noted exactly how long the corridors stayed empty between rotations. She watched the Vreth move and studied the way their heavy bodies carried their weight, where they were fast, where they were slow. She listened to them talk, and after 6 months she understood most of what they were saying. After a year she was fluent. She never let them know that. She was not the only one doing this. There were other humans on the station who had figured out the same thing. Not all at once, not through any single plan, but slowly, the way humans always figured things out when they had nothing but time and a reason to think. They had started finding each other. They talked in the food lines in low voices, in a simple code they had built together using a mix of old languages and made-up words. The Vreth heard them talking and thought nothing of it. They did not bother to learn human languages. Why would they? Grade 3 servals had nothing important to say. The network grew quietly. It had no name. It had no leader exactly, though Alara had become a kind of center for it. People brought her information. She remembered all of it. She kept it sorted in her head like a map, always adding to it, always looking for the moment when it would be enough. She had been patient for a long time. Patience, she had learned, was one of the things the Vreth did not understand about humans. The Vreth were proud and fast and powerful. When they wanted something, they took it. When something was in their way, they crushed it. They did not wait. Waiting to them was weakness. It was what prey did. But Alara had grown up being told a different story. She had been told that the strongest thing a person could do was hold on, that the ones who won the long game were not always the ones who threw the first punch, that pain was not the end of a person, that it could be the beginning of something else if you let it. She thought about that a lot, in the quiet hours after her shift ended. The station hummed around her. Machines processed ore from asteroids. Vreth officers walked the upper decks. Human workers slept in their shelf rooms and waited for the alarm that would wake them for another shift. From the outside, it looked like a place where nothing would ever change. Alara lay in her shelf space in the dark and stared at the metal ceiling 6 inches above her face. She was not sleeping. She was thinking about a maintenance window that was coming in 11 days. She was thinking about 3 specific storage rooms. She was thinking about 7 people she trusted and 30 more she was almost sure about. She was thinking about the exact number of guards on the lower corridor during the 3rd shift change. She was thinking about what came next. Outside, the station turned slowly in orbit. Earth sat below it, quiet and patient, waiting the way Alara was waiting. Not broken, not gone, just holding on the way humans had always held on, right up until the moment they decided they were done holding. That moment was getting close. She closed her eyes, not to sleep, to plan. Commander Grathvel arrived on the station on a morning when the lights had just switched from dim to full bright. That was how time was marked on Dominion's reach. There was no sunrise. There were no windows. There was only the lighting system cycling through its schedule and the humans learning to live inside it. His ship docked at the upper port with a heavy clank that shook the walls. Alara felt it from 3 levels below. She was in the middle of her shift, moving containers along the processing line when the shake came through the floor. Around her, the other human workers glanced at each other but said nothing. The Vreth guard straightened up. That was enough of a sign. Someone important had arrived. Grathvel was known even among the Vreth. He was not the highest-ranked commander in the Dominion, but he was one of the most famous. He had fought in the border wars against the Kesh, a species that had actually managed to hold the Dominion back for 30 years before finally falling. He had been part of the force that broke them. After the war, he had spent 2 decades traveling to newly conquered stations and colonies, doing something the Dominion considered very important, reminding the conquered species who was in charge. He was tall even by Vreth standards. His skin was the deep gray of old iron. There were old scars on his arms and neck that he had never had removed, because in Vreth culture, scars from battle were something to be proud of. He wore a commander's uniform, which was black with a narrow red stripe across the chest. He walked the way very powerful people sometimes walk, like the floor was lucky to have him standing on it. He moved through the station with 2 guards behind him and the station's own officers falling into step ahead of him, showing him around. He looked at everything with flat, unimpressed eyes. He had seen 100 stations like this one. They were all the same, conquered things, useful things, nothing interesting. He asked to see the human workforce. They brought him to the main processing floor. Alara was there when he walked in. She knew who he was before anyone told her because of the way every Vreth in the room shifted when he entered. Backs got straighter. Voices dropped. The guards near the walls moved without being told, forming a loose line along the far end of the floor. Grathvel stood at the entrance and looked across the rows of humans moving and lifting and carrying, and his expression did not change at all. He looked the way someone looks at machines. He walked slowly along the line, hands behind his back, looking at workers as he passed them. Some humans kept their eyes down. Some glanced up and quickly looked away. One young man near the back stumbled while carrying a container and nearly dropped it. A Vreth guard moved toward him instantly, but Grathvel raised one hand slightly, and the guard stopped. Grathvel watched the young man recover the container and keep moving. Then he turned away, as if the moment had already bored him. He walked until he reached Alara. She had not looked down. She had kept working, moving a container from one rack to another, and when he stopped in front of her, she straightened and looked at him directly. Not with anger, not with fear. Just looked at him the way she looked at any new problem, measuring it. The Vreth officer beside Grathvel said something sharp in their language, in order to lower her eyes. Alara understood every word. She did not look down. Grathvel studied her for a moment. Something shifted slightly in his expression, not quite interest, not quite annoyance. He said something to the officer in a low voice. Then he hit her. It was not wild or angry. It was precise. His right hand came across and struck her jaw with exactly the right amount of force, enough to hurt badly, enough to put her on the floor, not enough to break her jaw or knock her out because that would have made the demonstration too short. He had done this before. He knew exactly what he was doing. The sound of it was loud in the processing room. Alara hit the floor hard. The container she had been holding crashed beside her. Every human on the floor went still. Every Vreth guard watched with a kind of relaxed attention, like this was simply part of the visit. The Vreth officer who had spoken stepped back to give Grathvel more space. There was a moment of complete silence. Then Alara moved. She put one hand on the floor, then the other. She pushed herself up slowly, not rushing it, not stumbling. She got to her feet the way someone gets up after they have decided to get up. Her jaw was already swelling. There was blood in her mouth. She ran her tongue across her teeth, checking, all still there. She looked at Grathvel. She did not scream, she did not cry, she did not shake. Her eyes were completely steady and her breathing was calm. She had been hit before. She had trained for years. She had taken harder blows from larger people on purpose as part of learning how to fight. This was not nothing. It hurt. But pain was just information. Pain was just the body saying, pay attention here. She had learned to receive that information and set it aside. She spit a small amount of blood onto the floor, not aggressively, just practically, getting it out of her mouth. Then she looked at him again. Grathvel raised his hand for a second blow. She caught his wrist. She did not think about it as a decision. Her hand moved the way a hand moves when it has done something 10,000 times. She gripped his wrist and held it, and her fingers locked around the thick bone of his arm with a pressure that made the tendons in her forearm stand out. He could feel it. For one very strange moment, nothing in the room moved. Grathvel looked down at his own wrist, at the human hand wrapped around it. He tried to pull back a small test, the way a powerful person tests something that has surprised them, not expecting any real resistance. His wrist did not move. He pulled harder. Her grip held. His face did not show panic. Vreth did not panic in front of others, but something changed in his eyes. Something quiet and very fast, like a door opening onto a dark hallway and closing again almost immediately. He had not felt that before. He did not have a name for it. He had heard the word fear. He knew it was something that weaker creatures felt. He had believed with complete confidence for his entire life that it was something that would never apply to him. He was not entirely sure what he was feeling right now, but it was something. Every human in the room had seen it. Every Vreth guard had seen it. No one moved. No one made a sound. The processing floor, which was never fully quiet because of the machines, suddenly felt like the loudest silence any of them had ever stood inside. Alara held his wrist for 3 more seconds, then she let go. She stepped back and put her hands at her sides. It was the guards who moved first. 5 of them crossed the floor in seconds, and Alara did not resist when they grabbed her arms and pulled her away. She kept her eyes on Grathvel until the moment they turned her around. As they dragged her toward the corridor, she heard nothing behind her. No order, no voice, not even the sound of his footsteps moving away. Just silence. She had spent 3 years waiting for the right moment to start something. She had planned carefully. She had been patient. She had told herself and everyone in the network to wait, to be smart, to not act before the time was right. She had not planned this. But looking at it clearly, as they pushed her down the corridor toward the isolation block, she thought it might have worked out better than anything she had planned. The station had seen it, every human and every Vreth on that floor. And something had shifted. She could feel it in the air, even in the corridor, even with guards on both arms. Something had changed in the last 60 seconds that could not be changed back, like a first crack in a wall that looked solid, like the moment before a very long, very heavy thing starts to fall. She kept walking, head up, eyes forward. The isolation cell was small, a metal box with a cot, a water tap, and a drain in the floor. The light above never turned off. The door had no handle on the inside. Alara sat on the cot with her back against the wall and pressed the sleeve of her uniform against her jaw to slow the swelling. She was not afraid, she was thinking. She did not know exactly what was happening outside the cell. She could hear nothing through the walls, but she had a good guess. A Vreth commander had been made to look weak in front of a room full of workers, human and Vreth both. That would not be ignored. Something was coming. The only question was what shape it would take. What she did not know was that the thing coming was not just punishment. It was panic. Grathvel had returned to his quarters and closed the door. He stood in the middle of the room for a long time without moving. He replayed the moment in his mind. The human standing up, the blood on her lip, her eyes which had looked at him the way no grade 3 serval had ever looked at anyone, and then his wrist, held in her hand, not going anywhere no matter how hard he pulled. He was not a man who lost his composure easily. He had fought in real wars. He had stood on battlefields where the ground was covered in the bodies of both sides. He had been shot twice and kept fighting both times. He did not break under pressure. But this was not pressure. This was something else. This was the feeling of a thing you had understood completely your whole life, suddenly revealing that you had not understood it at all. He called for the station's head scientist. Scholar Yethsa was not a warrior. She was small even by the standards of the station's civilian staff, with pale gray skin and eyes that always seemed to be calculating something. She studied biological data the way some people study stories, always looking for what the numbers were really saying underneath the surface. She had been assigned to Dominion's Reach to monitor the health and productivity of the human workforce, which mostly meant making sure they did not die faster than replacements could be sent up. She had spent 2 years quietly noticing things that she had not been asked to notice. When Grathvel summoned her and told her what he wanted, she did not look surprised. She looked like someone who had been waiting for this question for a long time. She told him she would have a full report ready within the day. He told her to make it faster. She worked through the station's rest period without sleeping. She pulled every piece of data she had collected on the human workers, medical scans, physical performance logs, productivity measurements. She added to it everything she had observed herself but never officially reported because no one had ever asked for it before. By the time the lights cycled back to full bright, she had her answers. She stood in front of Grathvel and delivered them in a flat, careful voice, the way scientists deliver news they know is going to upset people. The first thing she told him was about muscle. When humans arrived on the station, they were graded as physically weak. That was accurate at the time of arrival, but the labor they performed every single day, the lifting, the carrying, the 12-hour shifts moving heavy containers, had been changing their bodies. Human muscle tissue responded to sustained, repeated stress by growing stronger and denser. After 3 years of this kind of work, the human workforce was not the same group of people who had first been loaded onto the station. Their bodies had quietly, gradually, without anyone noticing, become significantly more capable than the Dominion's original scans had recorded. They had been building strength inside the work itself. The Dominion had been running an unintentional training program. The second thing she told him was about pain. Vreth's nervous systems were built to avoid pain strongly. Pain was a signal that meant stop, move away, protect the body. It was a powerful and immediate signal. When Vreth soldiers trained, part of their training was learning to push through that signal in combat situations. It was considered one of the hardest parts of warrior conditioning. In humans, the relationship with pain was different. The human nervous system had a mechanism that, under extreme stress, could dramatically reduce the sensation of pain and push more energy into physical function. They called it adrenaline. It was a chemical state that turned a normal human into something noticeably faster, stronger, and harder to stop for a short period of time. And unlike Vreth pain tolerance, which had to be trained over years, every human had this ability already built in. Every single one of them could access it. The woman on the processing floor, HFY said carefully, had almost certainly been running on adrenaline when she stood back up. Grathvel was quiet for a moment, then he asked her to continue. The third thing was the one she had saved for last, because it was the most difficult to say. The humans had been watching, she told him. From the first day they arrived, they had been studying the Vreth guards, not obviously, not in a way that triggered any alerts. They watched the way workers always look at the people standing over them, carefully, quietly, with nothing in their eyes that looked like threat. They had observed how Vreth fighters moved, how they struck where they led with their weight, what their reach was, how they recovered after a missed blow. And they had shared this information with each other. The humans had a secondary communication system. It looked like idle conversation between workers. It was not. It was a code, built collaboratively over years, passed from crew to crew across the station. The Dominion's monitoring systems had never flagged it because no one had thought to look for it. Grade 3 servals were not supposed to be organized. They were not supposed to be planning anything. The assumption was so complete that it had functioned as a blind spot. The humans on the station had been training. They had been sharing intelligence. They had been building something invisible and patient inside the walls of a Dominion facility, right in front of everyone, without anyone seeing it. HFY set her data pad down on the table. She told him there was one more thing. She had looked at the physical performance data across the last 18 months and found a pattern. The improvements in human physical capability had not happened at random times. They clustered around specific events, arguments, punishments, difficult periods when conditions on the station had gotten harder. Every time the Dominion pushed the humans harder, the humans came out of it stronger. She used a phrase from the old reports she had inherited when she took the posting. The original scientist had written, in a note that had been filed and never read again, that humans appeared to have a strong baseline adaptation response to adversity. HFY had not paid much attention to it when she first saw it. Now she understood exactly what it meant. She looked at Grathvel and told him that the species they had classified as the galaxy's most manageable labor force had spent 3 years inside a Dominion station, doing the thing humans apparently did better than anything else in the cataloged galaxy. They had adapted. She closed her report and left one line at the bottom of the last page. She did not read it out loud. She left it for him to find. He found it. He read it 3 times. It said they were not broken by the collar, they were sharpened by it. He sat with that sentence for a long time in a room that had gotten very quiet. Outside the station, space was dark and empty and completely indifferent. Below, Earth turned slowly in the blue shadow of its own atmosphere, and in a small metal cell 3 levels below the command deck, Ilara Voss sat with her back against the wall, pressing her sleeve to her jaw, and waited for what came next. She had no idea that the station's head scientist had just handed the most decorated Vreth commander in the sector a report that had made him feel, for the second time in one day, the thing he did not have a word for. She did not need to know. She had her own work to do. They put Ilara in the cell and expected her to sit there. She did sit there, but she did not simply wait. She pressed her back against the wall, closed her eyes, and began counting. Not seconds, not minutes. She was counting through everything she had memorized over 3 years: guard positions, corridor lengths, the number of steps between the isolation block and the lower storage deck, the exact timing of the third shift rotation, the maintenance window. 11 days, she had thought before. But things had moved faster than planned, and plans needed to bend when they had to. She was also listening. The station had a sound, a deep, constant hum from the machines that never stopped. But underneath that hum, if you had spent enough time listening to it, you could hear the smaller sounds: footsteps in the corridor, the distant clank of a door, voices that were too far away to understand but close enough to know their tone. She had spent 3 years learning to read the station by its sounds the way old sailors read weather by the color of the sky. What she heard in the hours after she was locked in told her a great deal. The guards were agitated. She could hear it in the pace of their footsteps, faster and less regular than usual. She heard voices raised once, then cut off sharply. She heard the docking port clank twice, which meant ships moving. Something had shifted in the command structure of the station, something significant, and the effects of it were rippling downward through the ranks, the way pressure always moves downward through rigid things. She gave it 8 hours, then she let herself sleep. When she woke up, there was food in the tray slot at the bottom of the door. That was interesting. They had not skipped her meal. That meant no one had issued an order to punish her through deprivation, which meant whoever was in charge right now was either cautious or distracted, probably both. On the second day, she heard something that she had not expected. It was quiet, almost too quiet, and then she heard from somewhere farther down the isolation block a low tapping against metal. 3 taps, a pause, 2 taps, a pause, 1 tap. She sat up straight. She knew that pattern. She had helped build it. She pressed her knuckles against the wall behind her and answered. 3 taps, 2, 1. It took everything she had not to smile. Someone was in the cell at the end of the block. Someone from the network. They had been brought here after the incident, probably picked up as a precaution, one of the faces the guards had associated with her. But they were here, they were functioning, and they were telling her that the network was still moving. She spent the rest of that day and the next communicating through the wall in the slow, patient code they had built together. It was not fast. A full sentence could take 20 minutes, but she was not in a hurry. She was learning what she needed to know. The network had not stopped when she was taken. The people she trusted had read the situation correctly. The incident on the processing floor had done exactly what she had hoped it would do, though she had not planned it consciously. It had changed the feeling in the station. The human workers were different now. Not louder, not bolder in any obvious way. The Vreth guards would not have noticed it. But among themselves, in the food lines and the shelf rooms and the coded conversations, something had lifted. Something that had been sitting on all of them for 3 years, without a name, had shifted. The maintenance window was in 6 days. She started sending instructions back through the wall. On the 6th day, the lights in the station cycled to full bright and stayed there. That was the first sign. Full bright during what should have been a rest period meant a power drain somewhere, which meant the maintenance cycle had begun. Ilara stood up, rolled her sleeves, and pressed her ear against the door. She counted to 60, then to 60 again. On the 3rd count, the lock on her door made a sound it had not made before. Not the regular mechanical clunk of the guards opening it from outside. A softer sound. A different sound. Like something small and precise being moved by someone who knew exactly where to put it. The door opened. The young man standing on the other side was named Dav. He was 23 years old and had worked in the station's mechanical maintenance crew for 2 years. He was thin and quick, and had the kind of hands that could feel the inside of a machine without seeing it. He was holding a short metal tool that had started its life as part of a ventilation panel. He looked at her jaw, which was still bruised, and winced slightly. She stepped past him without a word. The corridor was empty. It would stay empty for exactly 4 more minutes before the next guard sweep. She knew this because she had been counting rotations for 3 years. They moved. What happened next in Dominion's reach was not a battle in any way the Vreth would have recognized as one. There was no charge. There were no battle cries. There were no dramatic moments of warriors meeting warriors in open space. What happened was closer to a controlled demolition, the kind of work Alara had done before the Dominion came. You find the load-bearing points. You work on them quietly and in the right order. You do not attack the walls. You remove what the walls depend on. The humans worked in small groups of 3 and 4. They moved through maintenance corridors and ventilation shafts that the Vreth did not use because Vreth bodies were too large to fit through them comfortably. They hit specific targets: a communications relay, a weapons locker that was open during its cleaning cycle, the same cycle Alara had noted 11 days ago, a power junction that, when properly interrupted, would cut lighting to the lower guard stations for exactly 90 seconds. The Vreth guards were fast and strong and trained, but they were trained for enemies they could see, enemies who came at them directly, enemies who fought the way Vreth fought. They were not trained for enemies who appeared from the walls, hit exactly the right place, and were gone before a response could be organized. They were not trained for an enemy that had spent 3 years learning every weakness in the building they shared. They were not trained for patience that had finally decided it was finished. Alara moved through the middle of it all like the center of something calm in a storm. She directed people with gestures. She changed routes when guards appeared in the wrong place. She kept the timing in her head the way she had always kept complicated structures in her head, all the pieces at once, always knowing which one needed attention next. She was heading for the command corridor. She knew Grathvel would be there. He was that kind of commander. He would not hide in his quarters when his station was compromised. He would move toward the trouble. It was the Vreth warrior way. Meet the threat directly. Show it that you are bigger. She turned the last corner and he was there. He looked at her and something moved in his face. Recognition, and underneath it something harder to name. He did not wait. He came at her immediately, fast and powerful, striking in the way that Kethra were trained, a short direct blow aimed at ending the confrontation in a single motion. She was not where his blow landed. She had watched Vreth fighters for 3 years. She had shared what she learned with everyone in the network. She had thought about this specific problem, a human body against a Vreth body, longer and harder than almost any other problem she had worked on. She was not stronger than him. She was not faster than him in a straight test. But she knew exactly what he was going to do before he did it. And she knew that the way he was built, the way his weight moved, and where his balance lived, had specific points where it could be interrupted. She stepped inside his swing. She redirected his arm using his own momentum. She drove her elbow into the joint below his shoulder with every bit of force her body had built over 3 years of 12-hour shifts carrying heavy metal in a Dominion labor camp. He was not finished. He came back hard. It was brutal and painful, and she took hits that would leave damage that would not go away quickly. But she had not come here to not get hurt. She had come here to win. She won. When it was over, she stood above him breathing hard, jaw aching, one eye swelling shut, and looked down at the most decorated Vreth commander in the sector sitting against the wall of his own command corridor, with his hands bound behind him in a restraint made from a communications cable. She looked at him for a moment. He looked back. She said nothing. She reached down, took the station's command badge from his chest, and walked toward the command deck. There was still work to do. The command deck of Dominion's Reach was not designed for humans. The consoles were too tall, the chairs too wide, the screens set at a height built for someone 2 feet taller than Alara. She dragged a supply crate across the floor, stood on it, and got to work. She was not alone. Dav was beside her, along with a woman named Sira who had spent 2 years quietly learning how the station's communication systems functioned, because she had been assigned to the maintenance crew that cleaned the command deck. They had brought her into the network early for exactly this reason. Sira's hands moved across the console with practiced confidence. She had never been allowed to operate it officially, but she had cleaned around it hundreds of times, watched the Vreth operators use it, and understood more about how it functioned than any of them had ever guessed. The station had gone quiet around them. The fighting was over. It had lasted less than 3 hours, not because the humans had been so much stronger or so much faster, but because they had been so much smarter about where to be and when. The Vreth guards who had not been subdued had fallen back to the docking ports, and for the moment, no one was pushing them. Alara had told the network to hold position and let the guards have the ports. They were not trying to hold the whole station forever. They were trying to hold it long enough. Long enough for what? The network had asked her that when she had first started laying the real plan out, not the original timeline, but this version, the one that had begun when a commander's hand hit her jaw on the processing floor. Long enough to send a message, she had told them. Not a message to Vreth Command. Not a threat, not a demand, not a surrender request. Those would all go directly into Vreth military channels where they would be classified and handled and suppressed. What she wanted to send could not be suppressed, because it was not going to be aimed at governments or commanders or military systems. It was going to be aimed at everyone. Sira told her the broadband channel was open. Alara looked at the screen in front of her. The channel could reach every Dominion frequency and range. That meant it would reach the other stations, the colony ships, the processing facilities on the outer asteroid belts, and through relay stations within a few hours it would reach the occupied worlds. There were 47 of them. Each one had its own conquered species. Each one had its own labor workforce living inside walls built by the Dominion, doing what they were told, believing that this was simply how things were now and how they would always be. Alara thought about that for a moment. She thought about what it felt like to lie on a shelf in the dark and believe that nothing would ever change. She nodded to Sira. The channel opened. The first thing they sent was not words. It was data. It was Yethzah's complete report, the one the scientist had compiled for Grathvel, the one that explained in clear biological and behavioral terms exactly what had been happening inside human bodies and human minds for 3 years inside a Dominion labor station. Alara had found it in the command system files. She had read it twice. She had understood, reading it, that Yethzah had known things she had never been asked about. The report was thorough and honest, and deeply uncomfortable for anyone who had assumed humans were simple. She sent the full report, unedited, to every receiver in range. The second thing she sent was footage. The station had cameras on every level of the processing floor. The moment from 2 days ago was still in the system. She found it, clipped it, and sent it. Grathvel's blow, her falling, her standing back up, the blood on the floor. The moment his hand came down a second time and the moment her hand caught his wrist. His face just after, that small change in his eyes. She let the footage speak for itself. Then she turned to the microphone. She had thought about what to say for a long time, not since she was taken to the cell, not even since the incident on the processing floor. She had been thinking about it for months in the back of her mind, alongside all the planning and counting and watching. If a moment ever came when she had a channel and a reason to speak, what would she say? She had gone through many versions, angry ones, defiant ones, long ones full of details and arguments. She had thrown all of them out. They were the wrong shape. She kept it short. She told whoever was listening that she was Alara Voss. She told them she was a human from a planet called Earth, which the Dominion had classified as a Grade 3 serval world. She told them that the humans on Dominion's reach had taken and were currently holding an orbital processing station, not with weapons from a military, not with ships or soldiers, with mining tools, kitchen equipment, ventilation shafts, and 3 years of paying attention. She paused. She said that she was not speaking to the Dominion. She was speaking to everyone else. The other Grade 3 worlds, the Grade 4 worlds, the Grade 2 worlds, everyone in every station and colony and processing facility who woke up every day inside walls someone else had built and believed those walls were permanent. She said, "We held one orbital station with tools meant for metal and food. Think about what comes next when we are not carrying boxes anymore." She said, "The walls are not permanent." Then she stopped. Sierra closed the channel. The command deck was very quiet. Through the screens, Alara could see the status indicators for the relay network. The signal was moving outward. It would take time to reach the farther worlds, but it was moving. Dav said nothing. He was looking at one of the side screens. After a moment he pointed to it. She crossed to where he was standing and looked. The screen showed an alert from the Dominion's central monitoring network. The signal had been detected. A response was being organized. It would take time, given the distances involved, but it was coming. She nodded. She had expected that. She walked back to where Grathvel was sitting against the corridor wall. He had been brought up to the command deck, still restrained, sitting on the floor with his back straight because even now he did not let himself slump. His face was controlled. He was not going to give her the satisfaction of seeing him broken. She understood that. She respected it in a distant way. She crouched down so her face was level with his. He looked at her. He was trying to look at her the way he always looked at Grade 3 servals, like she was something manageable, something he understood. His eyes were working hard to maintain that look and not quite succeeding. She held his gaze for a moment. She said simply that she needed him to be alive and functional because he was going to carry something back to Vreth Command. He was going to carry the memory of what had happened here, not as a story someone else told him, not as a classified report filed in a system where no one would ever read it. In his own mind, in his own body, in the thing that lived behind his eyes that had changed 2 days ago when a human woman caught his wrist and held it without shaking. He could tell them whatever he wanted about the station. He could tell them about the tactical failures. He could tell them about the network and the maintenance window and everything he had learned from Yethzah's report. That was fine. They needed to know all of it. But he was also going to carry the part that could not be put in a report, the part that happened in the body and not the mind, the thing he had felt in that half-second when he pulled against her grip and his wrist did not move. She stood up. In the Dominion's central war room, hours later, a classification was quietly changed. The record for the planet Earth, which had sat untouched since first contact, was opened by a senior analyst who had received the full transmission from Dominion's reach. The analyst read Yethzah's report. He watched the footage. He listened to Alara's statement twice. Then he opened the classification field and stared at it for a moment. He removed the words Grade 3 serval. He typed 2 new words, a category that had never appeared in the Dominion's records before, because in 3,000 years and 47 conquests, they had never needed it. He typed unresolved threat. Then he added 1 word below it, a word that in the Dominion's military system carried more weight than any other, a word that meant stop everything else and pay attention to this. Priority absolute. He submitted the record and leaned back in his chair. Somewhere in the relay network, the signal from Dominion's reach was still traveling outward, still reaching, still moving through the dark between stars toward 47 worlds where people who had forgotten what hope felt like were about to hear a human woman say 3 words that the Dominion had spent 3,000 years making sure no one believed. The walls are not permanent. It was a beginning.